We started this podcast, though, by talking about how there's this romanticized idea of being like an adventurer or a sailor and having kids. And you are kind of the walking example of that romantic story, and you are actually doing it. So I think it is possible. And like just by continuing to do you and Axel and Armand, like I think that does remain the romantic story. Hi, On the Wind listeners. It's Nikki here calling in from LA on the west coast of the US. So we are in full summer mode now at 59 North, which means everyone is spread across the globe, on and off the grid, on and off the water, and we are feeling that familiar sense of distance and I suppose missing each other a little bit. But we all get to do what we love and feeling very grateful for that. I've just finished up Race to Alaska and happy to say that my team won the race. If you follow the race, you'll know that really it's much more about the sense of adventure than it is about the winning. But it's a good story, and stay tuned because we've just recorded a bonus episode for this season in which I dive into what does adventure mean? Why do a race like Race to Alaska? And then we talk about some of the more complex leadership and strategic decision making that went on during the race. And yes, I do take holidays away from being a sailor to go sailing, but it is so good for us all to reconnect with it in a non-professional sense. More racing going on, in fact. August just finished up the Shetland race on Eastbourne and reported that they had a great time. I would recommend diving into the history of that race. There's some super fascinating stuff around the relationship between Norway and the Shetland Islands. And for any nerds out there, you'll enjoy that one. And on the subject of racing, actually, keep an eye on our calendar. There might be some interesting and exciting racing opportunities coming up between me and 59 North in 2024. And of course, Andy and Mia are reconnecting after Mia spent some slow months sailing across the Atlantic. They are in Annapolis finishing up a spa month for Falcon ahead of her next major voyage with Andy up to Greenland. And of course, last but not least is Adam, who's holding the fort down in Scotland. He had to stay home to look after his dog Angus, who had to have some emergency surgery on his knees. So it's so nice that we all have a spirit at the company where we can support each other when things come up like that. So yes, all well here, and thanks again for your loyalty and for listening. Hope you enjoy the show. This is one really close to my heart. On the Wind is presented by 59 North's longtime friends and sponsor, Forbes Horton Yachts. Forbes can help you buy your dream boat or can help you sell your current boat. And he can do this whether he is listing the boats or not online. So basically, you can find your dream boat all by yourself. Perhaps you walk down the docks one day and fall in love with something, or perhaps you persuade your friends to sell. Either way, you can get Forbes involved to be your buyer broker. Either you hire him or he just splits the commission with the selling broker and takes all the awkward money conversations out of your hands. You can also check out his listings online if you're interested at forbesyachts.com. That's Foxtrot, Oscar, Romeo, Bravo, Echo, Sierra, yachts.com. So for any listeners who don't know, I'm actually on the hunt to buy my own dream boat after 12 years sailing everyone else's boats. And this year I realised that I've never actually experienced the joys and possibly the pains of waking up in the morning and deciding where do I want to go entirely on my own terms. So yeah, a little side note, but if it all goes to plan, I'll be giving Forbes a call myself in the next 6 months. So if you, like me, are interested in buying a yacht, or perhaps you're selling your own one, go to forbesyachts.com. That's FORBES yachts.com. And you never know, we might cross paths. Thanks again to Forbes for sponsoring this episode. On the Wind is also sponsored by Dive Blue, who make portable, tankless scuba diving systems. If you are like me, sometimes you can find that the fuss and bother of all the equipment involved in activities like sailing and scuba diving really gets in the way of what they're all about, which is about connecting with nature. Dive Blue's Tankless diving system is a way around this. Divers can experience the beauty of the underwater world without having to worry about having scuba diving tanks on hand. So they have two types of system, the Nemo system for depths up to 10 feet, and the Nomad system, which is incidentally what 59 North has on each of their boats, and that will take you down to depths of up to 30 feet. So we actually jumped on the opportunity to buy these for a more practical use case. They offer us a super easy solution for inspecting the hull, the rudder, the keel, the shaft, for cleaning the hull, and for sorting out a prop wrap or any other underwater works. Being able to do this ourselves without relying on expensive dive companies or renting gear is so much more financially efficient and makes us self-sufficient, which are both massive ticks for anyone who is interested in offshore and ocean sailing. So if any of you are boat owners and are interested in Dive Blue's Nemo or Nomad systems, I massively recommend checking these out. Just head to diveblue.com. That's DIVEBLU and then the number 3.com. Thanks again to Dive Blue for sponsoring the podcast. You're listening to On the Wind, the podcast about offshore sailing. I'm your host, Nikki Henderson. Navigating the challenges of parenthood whilst also maintaining an unusual lifestyle, be that of a sailor, adventurer, or anything that doesn't involve the typical 9-to-5 desk job, has been a consistent theme of this podcast. And now the tables have turned. Andy, Mia and August are raising their two boys whilst running a business and working as professional sailors themselves. Hoping to be a parent myself one day, I took the opportunity to put them on the spot, to discuss what has surprised them about parenthood, what they wish they had known before taking the plunge, and what advice they have for anyone else like me who's dreaming of a similar future.
Okay.
Okay, should we begin?
Let's roll. Let's do it.
All right. Well, welcome team to this podcast.
This is awesome.
Thank you.
I'm so excited for this.
So on kind of a group request, we are sorry, I'm laughing because Mia's crying. Tears when you're laughing too hard.
Just ease into this one today.
Okay. Welcome everyone to this podcast. This was a group request really for us four to gather and talk about parenthood basically. And I think originally we were going to talk about parenthood and being a sailor. But what I was really interesting, I was just thinking about this and I was like, okay, are we talking about what it's like to be a parent and a sailor? Or are we talking about what it's like to be a parent and a business owner? Because we're all kind of, I say you, are all kind of both. I mean, what would you define yourself more closely with, I suppose, each of you, sailor or business owner?
I mean, both, but I think for me, there's like the challenges of being a parent and a business owner are on a similar spectrum as being a parent and an employee, for example. Those are more similar challenges than the challenges of being a parent and a sailor who specifically goes away for long periods of time. So in this context, I would say those challenges are fairly unique and more difficult than the challenges of being a parent and a business owner. But to answer your question, I think I define myself first and foremost as a business owner, not a sailor. Business owner who is also a sailor.
What about you, Mia?
I think also the business owner, because that's what I spend the most time on. I'm only going to sea maybe twice a year. I'm coming up on a trip now, leaving on Monday. But I think the challenge is, like Andy said, being away from the family and the house and like the normal routine for an extended period of time is, I think, the challenge as a parent and a sailor.
And August, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I agree with both of you, but yes, I think that the sailor for sure, or that's the in the context of this conversation, I think, because it is that's where I feel the greatest change has been, like with where the parenthood and this actual sailing part and being away, that's the sort of the big new and challenging and exciting thing is. So yeah, I'd say it's sailor, I think.
Yeah, because I think it's pretty romanticized, I think, the idea of being like a sailor or an adventurer and being a parent. And what's so romantic about that is you often see these pictures of parents with like their baby in their backpack adventuring off, or you see, you know, families with this like gorgeous tanned child running around the bow and then taking a lovely selfie. And the unique thing about you three is that you're away from your children. You don't really take Axel and Armin with you. What is the biggest challenge with that, Andy?
Well, I think what you touched on is the difference between being a parent, a sailing family, and a professional sailor and a parent, because we don't have the option to bring Axel along with us. We are a sailing family as well. It's why we have our little boat Spica here in Sweden, so we can take Axel and bring him up as so he can grow up as a sailor. But those are two very different things. And it just occurred to me too that like you've spent a lot of time with Riley and Elena and their kid as a sailing family. But that's not at all what I think we're talking about here today. I forget what your question was now.
Yeah. What do you find hardest about that? Because all three of you, when I asked you what do you define yourself as, mentioned the word challenge. So what is that challenge?
That's a great question. I want to answer that actually in a different way, because I think the thing that nobody said to me because like there's a theme going back 5 years of episodes before I had a kid, of me asking sailors who are also parents, like, hey, what kind of what can I expect? Because I think I want to do this. And not one person ever said that, like, actually, it's pretty great at times, because the first week or two that I'm away, it's such a relief to be on my own and free of the responsibilities of being a husband and a father, that it's like, I think I need that to be a better parent when I'm home. And that's something that I feel like is just culturally, like, nobody admits that it's like you need a vacation from your family sometimes. It's only talked about as a challenge. And actually, it's like way more than that. So where we were actually talking about this the other night, me and I, where the challenge comes in for me is the breaks between trips when there's downtime. When there's downtime is when I get lonely and I miss the family time. When I'm in work mode, it's actually not really a challenge, honestly.
Yeah, it's almost taboo to say that you don't want to just be with your child 24/7. I think that's even more prevalent in the female community at the moment, because women are sort of, there's this idolized idea that women like work full time and are mothers and like everything's possible. Like, Mia, do you find that? Do you find also that you like being away, or is it actually different for you?
I think, I mean, I actually have only been away twice on trips. Andy been away much more, because the first year, actually the first year and a half, I was home with Axel. And I think that's natural. As a mother, you stay home longer in the beginning with a kid because of breastfeeding, and they kind of need a mother in the first year. When I left, I felt it was pretty nice actually to get away. And for me, Andy had not been on paternity leave. So for me, it was kind of like a way for him to bond with Axel on his own without me being there, because that's important to me, that he gets a strong relationship with Axel. And to me, like, he's with his father. And when Andy was away, Axel was with his mother. And to me, I think a lot of people think you get much more questions as a mother. You're going to be away for 6 weeks from your child? How's that going to work? And it's so rare that guys get those questions. But yeah, I did find it, I enjoyed it, because I think it's also, for me, it's a choice to go. And I choose to go sailing. I want to go sailing. It's a part of me that it's been a big part of me for the last like 10, 15 years, to be at sea and be sailing and being with crew and doing all that stuff. So yeah, I did find it was, I wouldn't say it was a relief, as Andy says, because I think you need more time on your own in general, but I didn't find it that hard, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I remembering, because I was lucky enough to be with you that first
Yeah.
trip, and man, we faced that really difficult situation where the reality of our job, like when you go to sea, you can't go back to port. And if you remember, Axel got COVID about 2 days before we were about to leave for a 7-day trip. And you had that really challenging, like, do I go home? Do I leave? Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, yeah. So the first time I was gonna go to sea without Axel, I was flying down to Lanzarote to do it. First going down to Cape Verde and then a transatlantic with Nikki and the crew on Ice Bear, and everything was great. But then Axel got really sick. He got COVID.
Yeah, well done, Dad. I'm first week home with him, and Axel gets COVID.
Yeah, and he didn't just get COVID. He got really sick. He ended up in the intensive care in the hospital with long stories. So that was, if he would have just been having a cold, I would not have been faced, because you can deal with that. But with the history we have with Axel and being in such a bad state, he was going to do MRIs and everything. So I decided to go home. And I think it's really important to me that we have a business set up that there is a safety net, that if something would go really bad, there is a safety net that I could go home.
But like, let's just take ourselves back there, because I was there at that time. Like, that was really, really emotional for you both. Like, do you remember those phone calls you were having, Andy, with Mia?
Well, I was in the hospital with Axel, and I'm not sure we ever talked about this in the podcast. He got COVID, and it wasn't the COVID that made him sick. He had a COVID fever for a couple of days, and then he actually had a seizure from having a high fever over an extended time in my arms as we were walking into the hospital, because he wasn't getting better. And that was Axel's had a rough history. He had a couple brain surgeries when he was a baby. I've told that story before. But that was scarier by far than anything that happened earlier, because having him have a seizure in my arms was like, just, man, I lost it. But like, talking to Mia, he was fine in the end, but talking to Mia, it was a very difficult decision, because we never really ran through the scenario of like, what if, like, where we never really created any like trigger points, like, okay, if this happens, that triggers you to come home, and there's no debate. So we had to have that conversation in the moment, with all the stress of like, Axel and I are in the hospital, we're in COVID quarantine in a room. Mia's on the boat trying to decide, and knows, like you said, when you step off the boat leaves the dock, there's no going back for 7 days. And we just decided there was too much uncertainty, that if things went worse than we hoped, that would have been like a panic situation for me, like alone with Axel and not being able to contact Mia. And then it's like, okay, this is definitely not worth it. You got to come home.
But speaking about like being a mother or father, I think if I would have been home with Axel in the hospital, I think you would have done the same thing. Like, you would have come home as well.
I'm more emotional in general. I probably would have come home sooner than you. I think it would have been an easier decision for me.
I don't think it matters if it was the mother or the father away. I think we would have done the same thing, whether it was me or you away at that time.
So like, it's almost like if you're a sailor, you have to apply like sailing processes to parenthood, because what you're saying is, we should have thought about those like go, no go, like hard line, like almost safety boundaries of like, where does our line draw to make that conversation and decision easier?
Well, I've thought about this a lot before, because we went through a similar scenario of like when I got appendicitis on the boat in 2016, and what we said to ourselves in that moment to help us make the decision, what would we do if this wasn't us but one of the crew? Then it was like, oh, they would definitely go home, and it's like, okay, well, we need to treat ourselves the same way, because this is like a humanity thing here. This is not like, we can't put the business above people. And then it makes it an easier decision then, I think.
So I think what many parents listening to this will be amazed at is that in the space of a week, we had Axel in your arms having a seizure, massively high emotions and thousands of phone calls, like a 12-15 hour flight home, 3 days in the hospital. And then Mia, you decided to fly back out and join the boat and go across the Atlantic. Like, for many parents, that is absolute insanity. That would be like, we're never sailing again. Like, you are never leaving. So how do you find, like, what drives you to go away again and risk that all over again, over and over again?
I guess for us, for me at least, I think by having him really sick as a baby makes you realize that you can't always treat it as like, you cannot always be scared of it. And like, he had a really bad scare. We made the decision to go home. And then when things calmed down, he got home. Everything seemed to be smooth. It was time to go again. It's almost, I feel like, if I would not have gone, it's almost like when you're falling off a horse for the first time. You need to get up on that horse again and keep going, because if you wait 2 years, then you may never go on it. And I feel that was, to me, that everything was stable at home, and I almost treated it as a new situation. Okay, this is just a new situation. Everything is good. Axel is healthy. It's time to go. And so it wasn't actually that hard for me to get going again.
As I remember too, just to give it the 30-second recap, if people don't know that the story when Axel was born, he was born 9 weeks premature. He was very healthy. He got bacterial meningitis a week after he was born in the hospital, got an abscess in his brain and had to have 2 surgeries to drain that. We lived in the hospital for 9 weeks or 8 weeks or something as a family, the 3 of us, and came home. And now, thankfully, Axel is basically a normal kid. So that's the history you're talking about, that like getting through that and then hearing other parents talk about like their kid being sick. It's like, he'll be fine. like quote unquote normal stuff. So I think really, I agree with you, Mia, that really kind of gave us like a very, very high threshold of what is manageable, because we've already gone through really like, near death experience.
Yeah. And I think to me, it was important I wanted to go sailing, and this was the first time I was going to go. And I think we treated with pretty clear heads.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is you were so much looking forward to that first trip that there wasn't much that was going to stop you from doing that, because that was such a big milestone for you, and a way to get back your normal pre-Axel life and see what it's like. You needed to find out, and like you had a hiccup to that. So I think it was pretty easy decision to go back. We never even considered you not going. That was never a conversation.
Yeah.
There's some lessons here, I think, and a long conversation that we could sink into, but I want to grab August in a second, but around this idea of like how selfish versus selfless does one be as a parent, and is that 2 different things, or in fact the same thing? Is being selfish selfless, and is that inspiring a child? It's a difficult one, isn't it?
I do have a lot to say about that. Let's come back to that.
Yeah.
Before we sink into that, August, your unique situation is that these 2 they're both professional sailors. So they're 2 professional sailors bringing up a child, and have that kind of easy empathy, understanding of why on earth would you want to go 1,500 miles away from land in the middle of the Atlantic 1 week after your child was in hospital, like with a seizure. You, August, are probably in a more common situation where you're a professional sailor, but your partner and the mother of your child is not. How do you think you would navigate a similar scenario?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's I think it would be, well, I mean, I definitely think, when your kid is in intensive care, it's a good idea to go home, and I would have done that for sure.
We're all keeping notes, August. Thank you.
Yes. So I definitely do that. I do think that it's could be easier to like do like when like you guys, me and Andy, you're in the same situation basically, so it's easier for you guys to maybe, since you're in the same position in a way, it's kind of maybe easier for you to have that figure that out, since you're in the same boat, quite literally. For me, in our little household, I'm the only one who goes away for extended periods of time, and that is, you mentioned in the beginning there with the challenges, Nikki, and I think my greatest challenge with being away is just the guilt of having then Paulina, my partner, do like having then to shoulder everything that goes on in the house, and which can be substantial at times.
And she's working, right, August? She's not just like she has her own career.
Oh yeah. Yes, she has. She's working full time. Pretty intensive and like high stress. She's an architect. So for everybody, anyone who knows an architect probably knows what I'm talking about. With all the like the project based deadlines and all that, it comes with that. So it's a major constraint on her whenever I'm away. And also she usually we get to sleep every other night, and when I'm gone she doesn't get to sleep at all. So that's been the most challenging. um yeah, but it's also so in that respect it's been a lot tougher for me to leave than it was a lot tougher. And because I used to be back, I used to sail probably like a third of the year I would be at sea, and that would just not be possible anymore. So it's harder, but it's also like you said, Andy. I'm resonating with that feeling of that it becomes more meaningful, I think, to go sailing now, because just the contrast between being on shore and being on the boat is so massive, because you it's being a dad is amazing, and it's great, but it's not very adventurous, and you're quite shackled, and it makes that feeling of going to sea quite more. It feels a lot more of that freedom feeling that you have when you go to sea, basically, that we all know.
I feared. I'm remembering now that you're saying this. One of my biggest fears before even deciding that we wanted to have kids was that I would lose my passion for going to sea, because I want to be home with the family. And it never occurred to me that the opposite might happen. And that's exactly what happened. My passion, if anything, has only intensified. And I think you hit the nail on the head for one of the reasons why, is because that sense of freedom that we all philosophize about you're made acutely aware of how little freedom you have when you get it back as a parent.
Yeah, that's right.
August, I want to dig into you mentioned the word guilt there. I'm really glad you said that for two reasons. One, because I think maternal guilt is often talked about a lot more than paternal guilt. And it's, I guess, great for, I think, a lot of men out there to hear that is felt. I think women always have a community of other women who can bond with this feeling and get through it. What do you do to get through that yourself? Do you have other male or other friends who are parents who help you cope with that, or do you have another strategy? Maybe other parents feel this, and you could share some light on that.
Yeah, I do. Talk to people who's in the same situation. Like I've talked to you guys, Andy and Mia, and who's in a very similar situation. But then I have a lot of friends who work in the oil industry in Norway, who's kind of in the same boat in that respect, that they might work on the oil rigs and stuff like that. And it's and you but you it's very, like, you learn very quickly that it's just like every family and every parent and every kid and everything is so different, and everybody, I think, there's great advice and great to kind of learn and share from other parents, but I think it's in the end, it is something that you need to figure out for your own situation. I think comparing yourself to how other people are doing and how they are solving things, and I think that it's a very risky endeavor. So yeah, and other coping mechanisms, I guess I just try to work my ass off whenever I'm here and kind of build up some yeah, so that I feel that I've kind of to balance the scales as best I can, and yeah, to be as good of a dad, and take pull up the slack from when I've been gone, when I'm home, basically.
Can you describe that feeling when you come home and you see Armand for the first time? Like, what does that feel like when you've been away?
Oh, that's great. It's fantastic. It's yeah, quite something. It's been like, especially now, like from the last trip I did, he was like for the first time kind of, I think for he's a year and a half now, so he's just kind of beginning to, before I don't think he's like noticed that his concept of time isn't quite there. So if it had been a week or an hour since he saw me last, I don't think he really cared. But now
Like a dog.
we're yeah, but now we're getting there when he's like, he I think he misses me a bit, and he gets really excited when he sees me, and that's yeah, it's the best feeling in the world, probably. It's amazing. So yeah, it's not only like, it's not that the only challenge of leaving home is that guilt. It's also, of course, that I miss them a lot. So yeah, it's a big part of it.
Do you remember the first time you came back, Mio, after you were away, and how that felt?
Yeah, so the first time then was after my transatlantic. So I had been away from Axel for almost 4 or 5 weeks, I think, at the time, when I got to see him. And Andy had flown over to the US to be with his side of the family. So I met up with Axel at his dad's house, and he was asleep when I arrived. So I just got to snuggle up with him. When he woke up in the morning, he was first, so excited to see me, and he like could not get enough of like, snuggle. But then for like 2-3 days, he was quite mean to me. Like you could tell like he was not the best version of himself. And I think he was kind of like wanted to get back that I hadn't been there with him a little bit. It kind of felt that like, so I had to like be super like sensitive to him, and he like, yeah, it was actually surprising to me that he wasn't just like a dog all over me. He was actually like, kind of like, yeah, you've been away, and I'm gonna let you pay for it a little bit.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So human beings, even when their babies, are complex.
How old was Axel then?
He was 2. He just turned 2.
Okay.
Um,
That's right, because we had his 2-year birthday
Yeah.
party right after you got home.
Right. So if you're a parent and you go away, be prepared for it not to all be happy
Yeah.
clouds of love and fun when you get back.
And you had that too. One time, remember last time when you came home, Andy, you actually thought Axel was sick because he was crying and he was whiny, just like he acts when he has a fever. But he didn't have a fever. He was just mad at you.
He was mad, yeah. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see, because like Axel's just turned 3. And so we're at a different stage than you are, August, with like yeah, the first time I went away was in fall of 2020, and he was just, he wasn't even a year then, and like that was I think he like August said, he didn't really notice. But now the coolest thing now about coming back is he really knows you're gone, and he really looks forward to you coming back, and he'll like run over with his arms out and jump in my lap and give me a big hug. And like as he becomes more of a person, the feelings intensify even more, because kind of in the situation you're in, August, you're just getting to that point now, but before that it was like a one-way street. Like you gave everything to him, but you didn't really receive the excitement back. And now when you receive that excitement back, and in a way that is like a dog, like they pure excitement with nothing else attached to it, that's really, really cool. That's a really cool feeling. That is, you just, yeah, you can't describe it. It's just it's like pure love, right? It's like, it's so different than the love you feel for like a partner, because it's like so pure. It's just, yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, it's just, and just just like that, the happiness they feel, and it's all just so pure and innocent, and kind of just yeah, and you kind of get to experience that through them a little bit, which is amazing.
I mean, I'm actually curious how it's going to evolve, because I remember as a kid. My dad's not a professional sailor, but a couple occasions he would leave and go do a boat delivery with a friend or something like that. And as an older kid, I can't remember the first time he went away, but even as like a young teenager and stuff, like I think that was hard on me. It was really hard on me knowing, because like time when you're a 10, 12-year-old, like a week is a really long time and a month is an eternity. And that was really hard. And I had like some separation anxiety. Even I remember when I was really little, we were on our boat on a mooring in Annapolis, and I was probably, I don't know, 5 or 6, I would guess. And he got invited just to do a Wednesday night race. And like, I was really upset that he was going to go just for like a couple hours. So I wonder how Axel's going to be as he gets older and realizes that this is just a recurring part of his life, that one of his parents is away for a very extended amount of time. And you're going to be gone for 7 weeks. You leave. It's interesting that we're recording this now. It's Thursday. You're leaving on Monday and you're gone for 7 weeks. And like, as he gets older and understands what 7 weeks means, it will be I'm very curious to see how that evolves.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if it's going to be easier for him because he grew up with it. It's just part of what it is, or if it's harder because he grew up with it.
So let's imagine, because I think we've all been there in some ways. At a certain point, a child, I think, I'm not a parent myself, disclaimer, will say something like, but Dad, like, why do you have to go away? What do you think you're going to say to him when he starts asking that?
Because I want to. You touched on this before, and this is what I think makes we're in a very unique and privileged position to be able to choose how we live our life. We were talking the other day, August, about like quote unquote lifestyle design. Like we are in the very luxurious position as like business owners and leaders of what we do, that we get to dictate our schedule. And I think this would be a very different, I mean, I'm going to tell him I want to go because this is what I love to do. This is where I am the best version of myself. That's a lot different than if I'm, working for the man and have to go on a sales meeting that I don't want to go to, that I don't want to be involved in, that I have to dress in a suit for. I can't imagine what that must be like. Like, we were actually talking about this the other night, Mia. Like, is what we do hard? It's challenging, but is it hard? I actually don't think it's hard, because we're choosing to do it. It's what we want to do. The other situation would be very hard because you're going against like your instinct of like, nope, I don't want to do this and I have to.
So maybe August, maybe I'll ask you, let's imagine now again, Armin's a bit older and he comes to you and says, but, Dad, like everyone else's, parents don't go away, but you do. Why are you going away and not them? How would you explain that?
Yeah, it's a good good point. Well, I definitely will bring him along on the boat and get him to, I'll teach him as much as I can about this world as early as I can to kind of give him an understanding and hopefully also an enthusiasm and a love for the whole sailing thing and get him into that, so that hopefully that will make it easier for him to understand what's going on. If
I love that. That's like you could do that with partners as well. It's the same sort of thing, and then they understand where you are and so on.
But to me as well, I think it is about the way you act when you're home as well. Because I remember I was a nanny for a year and the dad worked away in the week, so he was
in that situation I described.
Kind of. He worked and he loved what he was doing. So he was left Monday morning, came home Thursday night late, and then Friday he went into the office in town, and then Saturday, Sunday he was pure on with the family. And the kids had the best dad for 2 days a week. He was part of, he was coaching their soccer team. They went to the market and bought food. They were cooking dinner together, and they had a really nice, happy dad for 2 days a week. And I think if you are away, you have to be really conscious of the time, what you do when you're at home, because you can't be, to me, it's hard to be away for 5 weeks. And when you come home, you're not present. I think that's important to like really transition into be like, you are a present parent the time when you're spending at home with the kid.
But also, I think the critical difference there is that he loved what he did. So he came back energized.
Yeah.
How important is that to do something you love? So you're, you know, and Andy, you said it too, I going because I want to. It's like communicating this lesson, like life's about doing things that make you happy. And what a great lesson to teach a kid.
Yeah, and I don't think the kids suffered from having, because in reality, like I see my friends who are working full-time jobs. You drop off daycare in the morning, you come home in the evening, you have dinner, play a little bit, and then bedtime. So the weeks are kind of routines. So yeah, and we always trying to make sure that before we leave or after we come home, that we do spend a full weekend together and just let Axel do whatever he wants with us. So
August, I'm laughing because when at least in the UK we have the take your kid to work day.
Yeah, I've heard about those. Yep.
Armin's going to
That'd be
have a
fun.
pretty cool one to tell his classmates.
Pretty cool. Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you're onto something very important there, because it's I think it's such a great thing to be able to show and to teach our kids that it's possible to do something like this for a living, and then kind of growing up and seeing that, you know, you can basically do whatever you want. And so I think I'm very excited for that, because I think I think this is the best job in the world. And like you said, like I can't imagine like having a job that, and having to go away to do something that you don't like. It would be, that's a nightmare. It scares the shit out of me. And so I'm going to be very conscious of kind of when Amund growing up, and showing him that, you know, you have to do something that you love to do, and him kind of seeing what I do, and hopefully being a part of that is going to be, I hope will help a lot.
Like, to be fair too, like we're like business stuff, like we exist in a fairly romantic career of being seafarers, but like you can be passionate about what quote unquote boring things, right? Like I always joke with you guys. I mean, sitting behind me is my holdfast putter that Nikki made fun of me for the other day. But like, if it wasn't for sailing, I'd be like super into golf. And Nikki's like, well, that's like the dumbest thing in the world. And same with Mia. So like, they like, just because something is, I think like sailing is sort of universally accepted as like this romantic thing to do, that everyone can understand why you could be passionate about it. But some things don't have that, but you can still be passionate about it, is the point I'm making, I guess. And that's the key. Like if Almond grows up and is super into math, and like his passion is accounting, like great. Like that's great. The point you're making is find that passion and do that.
Do you expect it to be problematic should like Axel or Armin just like really, really dislike sailing and want to spend every single weekend? You want to go sailing and he wants to go and play video games in the video game club. Like, how are you going to navigate that?
I actually think that's probably going to happen for a period, because of what you said, Mia, about him being mad when we're away. Like, I'd be kind of surprised if there wasn't a stage of his life where he's like, F this, sailing is what takes you guys away from, or I guess this is a fear. Maybe it's not an expectation, but like, it's something I think about, that it's like, okay, sailing is what takes you guys away from me, and I don't want to have anything to do with it. And like I'd be not be surprised if that happens for a period. But I also think the way to mitigate that is not like kind of what you said, August, to teach them. Like we had Axel in Gosport when Falcon was getting finished, and make him feel like a part of it and not a separate from it. Not make him feel like we're going to do this now and you can't come. He literally can't come on the passages now. But we can bring him to the boat between trips. We can bring him to the boat for maintenance. We're going to be hanging out on the boat in Annapolis this summer. And like, he knows you, he knows Adam, he knows August, he knows the gang, so that he feels a part, like that he is a part of it instead of literally a part, like away from it. And I'm hoping that is what keeps him enthusiastic about wanting us to keep doing what we do and enthusiastic about sailing. But it won't surprise me if there's a phase where he's like, F this. And I think the question you were actually answering is what if he's just indifferent to it? Like, I'll just do whatever he wants to do. And like, I think that's the thing you learn now at a young age. Like, he's at the age where he's going to do whatever he wants to do. You can't change that. And you just, to be a present parent, like Mia said, you just have to follow him and do what he does. And like, that's okay.
August, what do you think? What do you think? What if Armin just isn't into it? Will that be okay for you?
Yeah, I mean, that if he's not into sailing, that would be I would be sad about that, because I would love nothing more than to go sailing with him and kind of teach him and share all that I know. But if he's not into that, but into something else that makes him happy and healthy, then yeah, I'll support him the whole way. If that turns out to be something that I judge as unhealthy, I will definitely have problems with that. I think I don't know, like you mentioned, if he goes down the video games, if that's his great passion, or accounting, if that turns out to be his thing, I'll probably have to struggle with that a little bit, I think. But it's yeah, I think it's like you said, Andy. I think it's gonna happen. I think, like, regardless of how, if Axel or Amund feels like sailing is robbing them of their parents, I think every kid goes through a phase where they just don't want to do whatever the parents are doing, and everything the parents are doing is uncool, and they want to do their own thing. So we probably will experience some of that, but then hopefully it'll pass and they'll come back.
Is this reminding you of your own childhood here, August? Are we sort of digging into an old memory?
Yeah, aren't you a fourth generation or third generation filmmaker here? I mean, you've pretty much followed in the footsteps of your dad and his dad, so you got good genes for that.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. Very very what's the word? Following, conformative person in that. Yes, I'm a third generation filmmaker, and yeah. So I guess if Amund has inherited some of my tendencies to follow my forebears in profession wise, we're off to a good start, I think.
So, one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast is because, I have my own hopes and dreams of becoming a parent one day. And, of course, I'm a professional sailor. It sounds like, while there might be some negativity in some areas of your decision to become parents, you're happy about it. So, like, if you were to tell me, maybe we'll go around, me, as you can start, you should go with it. You should become a parent. I encourage you to become a parent and continue to be a sailor, because why should I do that? Kind of sell it to me.
Oh man. I mean, I think a friend of mine told me that when they were on the edge of having kids or not, and she said, I want to be a parent when I'm 50. I want to have the family. And that means, because we weren't really 100% sure if we wanted to have, it was never a good moment. We never came to a point in our life and it was like, this is a great moment to try to have children. But I always saw myself having kids as an older. And like August was saying, like, sharing that passion with a kid in the future. And like, even now, Axel is 3 years old. It's really cool to be able to, like, I mean, the first sign he was doing, and one of the first words he was doing was big boat. It's and I think that having a child, even if it's a different lifestyle, just brings out so much joy of it. That's what I think is the best. And yeah, you can share it with them, and they can be excited, and they probably will teach you things that you didn't see on your own with your own eyes. It's like having Andy as a partner from the US living in Sweden. I see Sweden with different eyes because of Andy, and I think same thing. I see the sailing in a different eyes because of Axel. And I think being able to have the dream of going cruising with him and showing him, it's one thing to show the crew what we do, but one thing, different level to be able to show Axel what we do one day. Imagine bringing him on between trips in the beginning and show him Antigua, places that we really enjoy, go hiking in the Azores. And so
I
just
love
the
that. I
sharing
love
part.
that romantic idea, and then I'm remembering the reality of cruising with Axel when he was 11 months
Yeah.
old, which was basically me, us three, Axel, and a lot of crying.
But yeah, so I
Very
think
little.
the sharing eventually is going to be, it's what's really cool to me, and just being able to, yeah, it's something to look forward to come home to when you are away as well.
I love that. It's like you're almost saying having a child allows you to see sailing through a child's eyes in this kind of like new and exciting way, almost like you're seeing more joy in what you do than you did before.
Yeah.
Mm.
What about you, Andy? Why should someone who's a professional sailor have children?
I actually don't think they should unless they are 1,000% sure that like having a kid is what you want to do in your life. I got advice from a friend. I won't say him by name on here, but it's the first person I've ever heard say that like, and his kids are older now. His kids are in their 20s and graduated college. And, you know, I would ask him before we had Axel, like, hey, you know, what do you think? What's it like? He's like, I'm not sure I would do it again. And this kind of ties into the selfishness thing of it. And I think the wake up call for me is I had this romantic idea that if I'm on the boat or if Mia's on the boat, the other partner with Axel, they'd fly out and meet us in between trips and we'd hang out. It's just impossible. Like, it's just so much. Like, I've just accepted that, like, when they're this age, just staying home is like the only really reasonable thing to do because it's such. I mean, we even like, you know, it's even harder for us because I've got family in the US. So, like, doing it again, I'm taking Axel alone on a 9-hour flight in the middle of the daytime while Mia's at sea. And like, it's 9 hours in 30-second increments because that's his attention span. And like, a lot of it sucks, honestly. Like, a lot of it is really, really stressful and really annoying. And you like, it's just, no one told me how relentless it is. It is just relentless. The three of us are going to Stockholm tonight, and Axel's staying with his grandparents. I can't wait to go to sleep tonight without him next to me, and then without him waking me up at 6 a.m. I can't wait for that. So I'm not doing a very good job of selling it.
Never ever go into sales, Andy. Never.
But I think like this is truly one of those personal things that like you will not. I don't want to. If I have to sell it with you, if I have to sell it to you, then you shouldn't do it. You need to be able to. It needs to be like a fundamental thing. And this comes back to what you were saying about like us deciding like, okay, we're just going to do this. I could never imagine a life with a kid. I still can't believe I have a 3-year-old that I have to take care of. But I could also never imagine not doing it. It was just something that felt inevitable. And I will to take this even deeper. I never understood why people would have kids until my mom died. And we were in the living room at my dad's house. My mom was in a hospital bed in the living room. My sister and I were at home. Kevin, my sister's now husband, was hiking the Appalachian Trail. You were at sea. We knew my mom's death was coming. She had brain cancer. My sister and I were sleeping actually upstairs in my parents' bedroom. My dad was on the couch sleeping with my mom in the living room. The last 6 weeks was pretty brutal because that was like every night. And she died in the hospital bed with her hand on my dog's head that morning. And my dad came up and told us that she died. And it was, in the moment, it was kind of a relief. But then there was this like surreal hours where my dad's dad and mom came down to the house. The coroner came and like took her away in a minivan hearse type thing. And we're standing around in the kitchen. And I had this just foundational, this was in 2012, so a long time ago, way before we had kids, foundational realization that like, there's my dad now alone, and he's not alone because my sister and I are there. And I was like, holy shit. It was like I realized the meaning of life in that moment. And ever since then, it just felt like, okay, I understand like on a fundamental level why people have kids. It's so you're not alone when your partner dies. It's like such a, and I like that did it for me. So like to take the depth away from this again, it's like you'll know. Like if you know, you know, and if you know you don't know, that's okay too. My sister's not going to have kids, and that's her choice because she knows. Like, you
So
just have to know.
away from advice from actually having kids or not, but how do you feel about that and sailing? Do you think that that's a great thing, or does that make it more difficult, better, worse?
What, the fact that I'm going sailing? No, I'm gonna go back to what August said. The contrast. It's like my life as a sailor and a husband and a person before was like in black and white, and now it's like in color, because you just appreciate things way more, because you're more free, but you're more limited, and I think you're more free because of that limitation. Like the moments you're free, you appreciate. Like right now, he's at daycare. I'm very much appreciating this right now that he is not here. And not that I don't like. I don't want to give the wrong impression. I love Axel. I love being a dad, but like, I am a selfish person. I need to take care of myself, and I can't do that when I'm taking care of him. And I'm a mental. You and I share a lot of mental aspects of like emotions and stuff, and how we're like deeper people, and I require a lot of self-care, and I can't do that when he's around. So I really cherish the moments, sailing or not sailing, and sailing is self-care for me as well. Like that, I need that. So it's even more of a yeah. I don't know if I answered your question, but
No, I bet people will be refreshed to hear that, because I mean, my mum said the same thing to me. She said, when you're pregnant, everyone's just going, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing. How wonderful. How excellent." Everyone's just flowers and butterflies and everything. And like, bang, the moment that baby comes out, it's so hard. And she said, like, she had 4 children, but she said, why did no one tell me how hard this was?
yeah, that's what I was going to say. Why no one ever told me how relentless it was, how just relentless, and just every second of your day that he is in the vicinity, you will not have 1 second of your own mental space or physical space or anything. And just the relentlessness of that is that's the hardest part for me, is that relentlessness.
I think as sailors, we know the importance of facing reality. Like, you cannot just like pretend the storm's not there, the storm is coming. So I think that it's nice. It's like you both kind of said, you see the world in like color, not black and white. You see more joy in what you do because you have a child, but it's good to balance that with the reality. August, you got a third and a final sum up here. What do you reckon? Why should someone be a sailor and have kids? Like, why pursue both of those near impossible feats simultaneously?
It is. I think it's a beautiful combination of, I think, really contrasts is like what makes life beautiful in many ways. And I can't think of anything that's more of a greater contrast between like being a just being a family person, a parent, and also an offshore sailor. And that's it just makes you appreciate both of those even more. So it's great. It is, but I'm like you, Andy. I'll be hesitant to kind of sell it. Like, I wouldn't take that job as a salesman for having kids. I think it is it's also important to not romanticize it too much, and especially I think to people who are sailors and who are spending a lot of time at sea and who love doing that. And you would have to be prepared to make some changes to your lifestyle for sure, and it's be prepared for that. For that reason, I didn't want to have kids for the longest time. I had kind of decided that I wasn't gonna have children, and I remember those podcasts of yours very well, Andy. This was before we knew each other, but you did those podcasts where you were really interested in how people were dealing with this, and I've always thought of having kids as like it's the biggest decision of your life. It's definitely it's nothing what's going to come close to that. And it's so I treated it like I do with most things that I'm uncertain of, just research it to death. And like there's a lot of, and I'm surprised that people doesn't seem to do that with, people will spend weeks to research what kind of, guitar amp to buy, but then having kids, just like, yeah, it feels all right, just go for it. It amazes me. And there's a lot of studies and a lot of papers that go into this, like the happiness, well-being, and lifestyle choices, and especially parenthood. And it's they almost all of these studies agree that having kids, there's nothing else you can do that will as reliably ruin your happiness as having kids. It's pretty, like, even
You are really selling it now.
it's no, it's but I think it's an important thing for people to know that, like, statistically, it's like the death of a loved one, or like a terminal diagnosis. Even those things, after a certain amount of years, won't make you as unhappy statistically as having
This is taking a bit
children.
of a U-turn.
This is amazing. I love this. Keep talking. This is fantastic.
But I think it is, and I think just knowing that, and it's but there's a lot to this, and there's a big difference in there's many kinds of happiness, and there's many different types of ways to be happy that we can go down a wormhole here. But I think that the point is that you should be. It would be a very good idea to be prepared for how tough it is. And that's probably the reason why many people are reporting
I'm
less
going to bring
happiness.
this back to sailing now, because what you just said reminds me of what people like. No matter how much we tell people to prepare them, they've never been offshore before, how physically difficult it is to take a dump on the boat, for example, or do anything really, brush your teeth. They're like, yeah, whatever. And like after the trip, everyone's like, man, I wish you would have told me how difficult this is, like physically. It's like, yeah, well, we tried to tell you, but like you can't emphasize that enough. Like you just won't know. And that's the thing. Like I learned, it's like, oh yeah. And speaking of the research, August, I was definitely in the non-research camp. So much so that like Axel was 9 weeks premature, and I'm just like, all right, I'll start like listening to podcasts and reading this stuff. Like I got 2 months. This is plenty of time. And then like I'm in Colorado skiing, and Mia's like, hey, this is happening. You got to get home. And I'm like, holy crap. So I'm researching, okay, what does premature baby mean on the plane ride home? Like, what am I getting into? I had absolutely no idea. And I'll actually give the counter argument to that like, it's fine. Like you'll figure it out.
Oh yeah, I think for the actual how to take care of a baby, a lot of that's just going to come. I agree.
Yeah.
And I sound very like a very kind of pragmatic wise ass here with my research and all this stuff. But then, I did decide to have a kid and all that, I guess. So
despite the statistics.
Despite those statistics, and yeah. There we go. It's I had all the facts, but then met Carolina, and then that was it, I guess. So the heart wins in the end. I think.
Right. Well, thanks, August. We started this podcast though by talking about how there's this romanticized idea of being like an adventurer or a sailor and having kids, and you are kind of the walking example of that romantic story, and you are actually doing it. So I think it is possible, and like just by continuing to do you and Axel and Armand, like I think that does remain the romantic story. But in fact, I think it's really cool to have that, sitting side by side with the true story, which is what I think we all want, and what podcasting almost is, aspiring to find, is the truth behind people and behind their lifestyle and their experiences. And I think, thanks for being honest. I bet you a lot of people listening will be like, oh my gosh, thank goodness someone said that out loud. So good for you guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, but it's one thing I want to share too, because I'm the only mother in the room now, and I think culturally it's so much more accepted for guys, for fathers to leave than it is for mothers. And I think I see it in crew that come sailing with us, that it's like it takes a lot of mental and every strength you have for mothers sometimes to peel away and let the father be home with the kids. But I think it's good sometimes to just remember that dads are equally capable after like a year or two, when the kids are kind of settled in, that women are equally capable of leaving and men are equally capable of staying home. And I think if you want to leave, go crewing on a boat or get into like a professional career, whatever it is, even if it's just going hiking a mountain for a week, at some point you just have to trust that the partner can deal with it, and they can. And I think that's why I think the cool thing for us is that I trust you 100% when Andy, when I'm leaving, and you do the same to me. And I think it's really neat to see, and hopefully our business, by showing that we can do it, that we can inspire other people to do the same thing and follow their dreams. It doesn't have to be away half the year at a time. It could be just going away for 2 weeks on a passage. And I think I truly think that if you manage to do that, you will be a good version of yourself, and your kids is going to be better set up when you come home. And I think it's just really empowering for a family to see that, like, if that's not the normal structure in the family.
I wonder how much of that romanticized idea being a parent and adventurer was enabled by like old fashioned cultural ideas of like, typically it was a man adventurer, typically like they're being enabled by the mother just taking care of everything, even when they're home, quote unquote, between adventures. Like that romanticized aspect of it is actually quite false when you really look at it. It's not reality, especially how we want to live life now. There's and I think that's why maybe we don't sound as romantic as you hear those old stories, because like I still have to be a dad. I don't have, and I want to be a dad. And I just wondered, this is a whole other podcast, I think, but like that just occurred to me that traditionally romantic idea of this is based on false premises.
No, I think that's a really good point. And I like, that's really interesting. And especially as a family unit now does not necessarily have to exist of a mother and a father. You do have two mothers or two fathers or two people, irrespective, bringing up children, and they're managing to do it. So these sort of like stereotypical roles are limiting our understanding of reality almost. Like, yeah, the labels are not helpful. Especially in our contemporary lives that we live.
True. Yeah. No, it's right about those. And I think more and more about these kind of old school kind of high seas heroes that you read about and you grow up with. Just like I kind of see them in a new light now as just being like awful dads, just like all of them. It's just which is an interesting perspective, and you kind of you just start to with when you're a parent yourself, you kind of look for that part of the story, and you have to look really hard for it, but when it's there, it's like just awful. So with them, often just abandoning their families for years on end, and yeah, just the selflessness and selfishness balance is just all way off. So yeah.
Do you almost feel like a sense of responsibility to like create new heroes for the world? Like, we don't have to use those people as like our idols or our there's an opportunity here to create examples, as you guys are, of people who can do both.
I actually think about it differently. I think of those people still as heroic figures. Not heroic's the wrong word, but like I still idolize those people, but you also recognize the flaws. Like I think that's okay. Like you don't have to discard that history. you have to see the whole history. I think that's like more important than I actually think that's more important than just ignoring it, discarding it, and saying it doesn't count anymore. Like it happened. It happened the way it happened. It wasn't how I want to live. And it's recognizing, like you just said, August, recognizing that and saying, okay, I'm idolizing this person for all these things that they did, but I'm also like critical of this person for all these other things I did. And then I can look at, if you can look at that truthfully, then you can say, how do you want to live your life based on that? Everything's nuanced. Like that's the thing. Like you have to recognize that nuance.
I actually sit here,
Absolutely.
I mean, we're digressing slightly, but I feel jealous of you and August that you have people you can idolize in that world that are like you, because I think that something, you know, women are already kind of up against that kind of, oh, you're a mother, you shouldn't leave. And then you don't have we don't have so many examples by any stretch of like, well, she did it, whereas you guys do. And I think we are like, it's just important to recognize that that doesn't exist for women in the same way.
Yeah, and a lot of the books and the stories about the women are usually young women who do it before they have kids. If you think about it, like most of the few books that are out there are just younger.
Good for you, Mia. You're trailblazing.
That's a really good point. So then in that respect, like creating not even new heroes, but like just like establishing like it's a blank slate.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I hope what we do can be inspirational to people, because I think when you see a living example of someone doing something, it's easy to connect to that than if it's nothing there. Like you said, if we don't have any books to read about it, what is it to inspire to if there's nothing there? So this
is slightly a digression to the digression, but Tom Cunliffe's wife reminds me of someone like this that had she had this like version of herself where Tom Cunliffe is seen, he's the public figure as the writer and stuff, but she was there throughout everything. She has a wall of books written by women, sailing books, and like I think that was a very cool story when we went to see them at
her mission was to find all the sailing books by women, and had a whole bookshop full of them, which was really cool.
Yeah, Ross is her name. Yeah. She's awesome.
Thank you, August.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, I think that's an interesting place to wrap it up.
Yeah.
I think I'm looking forward to interviewing Armand and Axel and any other further babies that might come along. There's no hint there, by the way.
No, there's no more babies in this household, I promise.
And seeing what they think. But it's exciting. I mean, it's cool that we finished on that point, I think, because what we're saying is we're building a different future. And maybe the children of sailing parents will have something different to say about, you know, who they can look up to and who they can aspire to be, which is really exciting.
What did you learn? You're not going to get out of this without being asked.
I am learning, like I am in this stage of learning, that you have to face the reality of something. And I guess relearning or reminding myself, because we learn this sailing, that something can be really, really hard and really, really amazing at the same time. And you can accept the bad bits, and you don't have to be afraid of them, I think. And then that's what I'm going to take away from that.
Cool.
I think from working with you three have gained an awareness that surrounding yourself with people in similar lifestyles, living similar lifestyles, is really important, because I think you guys find solace with each other, and you can say, oh my gosh, I have to go sailing, and when you say that to someone who understands, there's just that feeling like, oh wow, they get that. And I can see that that can just be easier for especially August, as you don't have your partner sailing.
This goes beyond us too. I mean, Chris and Eric, two of our skippers, they both have young families as well. So that's like, we're all in this together. And like when I sit down and make the sailing calendar for Falcon, all of the skippers, aside from you, Chris, Sophie, Eric, me, we all have kids. So like when I'm making the schedule, I'm trying to create a way that like it allows us to be gone for a reasonable amount of time and take turns and come back and forth. And like that's a really interesting way to build a business as well, where that accommodates this, because we all want the same thing.
Yeah. I really think we're going in the right direction, and see you in 10 years when I may or may not have my own.
10 years, I won't be 50 yet. Almost. Holy smokes. Whew. All right, let's wrap this up.
Yeah, thanks everyone for listening, and yeah, hopefully this is a window into the backstory of, I guess, Andy, Mia, and August and their family life.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
facilitating the conversation, Nikki. Really well done. Nice questions.
Yeah, thank you. This was fun.
Bye everyone.
Bye, August.
Thanks again to Forbes for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. If you would like to buy your dream boat or sell your current boat, go to ForbesYachts.com. That's ForbesYachts.com. That's ForbesYachts.com. Also, thanks to Dive Blue once again for presenting this episode of the podcast. Go to diveblue.com. That's DIVEBLU, 3.com, to check out the Nemo or Nomad dive systems and never have to rely on anyone else to check what's on your prop again.
On the Wind is the podcast about sailing, created by 59 Degrees North and hosted by me, Andy Schell, and also by August Sandberg, Nikki Henderson, and Emma Garshagen. The show is mixed and produced in Frederick, Maryland by 59 North's official ship's pilot, as in airplane pilot, and podcast producer Lee Cumberland. Episode artwork and website show notes are done by Laura Parent in San Francisco. The intro theme music is composed and performed by former podcast guest and musician Cameron Dale, while the outro music you're hearing now is, of course, by our friends the Stormweather Shanty Choir. We love hearing from our fans, so send your questions and comments to holdfast@59-north.com. And please do us a favor and share the show with your friends, review the show on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, until next time, hold fast.
And the horse, I made up me mind that I was inclined to go to sea no more. No more, no more, to go to sea no more. I made up me mind that I was inclined to go to sea no more. As I was walking down the street, I met sweet Angeline. She said, come home with me, me lad, and we'll have a cracking time. But when I awoke, it was no joke. I found I was all alone. My silver watch and my money too, and my whole bloody gear was gone. Was gone, was gone. My whole bloody gear was gone. It was when I awoke, it was no joke, for my whole bloody gear was gone. As I was walking down the street, I met Big Rapper Brown. I asked him if he would take me in, and he looked at me with a frown. He said,
last time you was paid up with me, you talked up no score. But I'll take your advance and I'll give you a chance to go to sea once more.
once more, to go to sea once more. I'll take your advance and I'll give you a chance to go to sea once more. Sometimes we're catching whales, me lads, but mostly we get none. With a 20-foot oar in every paw from 5 o'clock in the morn. And when daylight's gone and the night's coming on, we rest upon our oars. And oh boys, you wish that you was dead or snug with the girls ashore. Ashore, ashore, or snug with the girls ashore. Oh boys, you wish that you was dead or snug with the girls ashore. Come all you seafaring lads that listen to me song. When you go a big boating, boys, make sure you do not go wrong. You take my tip when you come off a trip, don't go with any horse, but get married instead and have all night in bed and go to sea no more. No more, no more, to go to sea no more. Get married instead and have all night in bed and go to sea no more. No more, no more, to go to sea no more. Get married instead and have all night in bed and go to sea no more.